What's up? Welcome to the channel. Sorry that this video has been so long in the making. So several weeks ago when I originally started recording for this video, I got in a car accident that same day. So most of this footage has just been sitting around on my hard drive just waiting for me to get around to editing it. Now this is the episode in which we're going to go over the Yi 4K Action Cam. We're going to look at some footage that I shot that day and also some footage that I shot a few weeks later while I was on vacation in Malibu. We're going to look at the different frame rates that we can shoot with. We're going to look at the image stabilization and a few other things that this action cam offers. So let's dive in and take a look. Alright guys, so here we are. We're in DaVinci Resolve. This is what I've been using now for the last little bit, and we've got several clips from our footage here. So let's go ahead and try putting this all on the same screen. Alright, so you can see here I've got clips from a few different days. So we'll go ahead and we'll scrub through this, we'll look at it, but let's just dive right in. Alright, so diving in here, let's take a look at some of the clips that we've got. So on this first set, we've got on the left hand side we have stabilization off, on the right hand side we have stabilization on. So if we go ahead and we take a look at this, we can see that the right hand side is much smoother than the left hand side. The left hand side, we're walking at a decent pace. We're not trying to go too fast, but we're trying to hold the camera decently steady. You can definitely feel kind of each footstep as it's happening. Whereas on the right side, it's a lot smoother. It's not so jittery back and forth. We still have some movement, but it's not nearly as much movement as we have with the stabilization off. And then the second set of clips is basically the same thing. We've got on the left hand side we have stabilization off, on the right hand side we have stabilization on. And again, you can see the left hand side, we've got a lot more movement, whereas the right hand side, especially if you watch that rail, it's just a lot smoother. Now here's something else that's really interesting to look at. So on the left hand side I have distortion off and image stabilization off, but then on the right hand side I turned on both distortion correction and image stabilization. Now let's look at some of the interesting things that happen here. So looking at them in comparison, we can see that the right hand side seems to look a lot better. I mean, it's a lot smoother and stuff. But let's look at the clips one at a time and see what happens here. Locking distortion on. So left hand side, yeah, we've got a lot of movement here. This clip, it's pretty bumpy, it's kind of going everywhere, but things look relatively normal. It's nice and flat. Now let's look at this other clip though. What winds up happening is when we have both distortion correction on and we have the image stabilization on, we wind up with some weird artifacts. You can see right there. It's like our image has become a piece of paper that's kind of blowing in the wind. You can see if you look on the edges in particular, you can see it seeming to wave. Stabilization you see that warping. On. And so one of the bummers about having both image stabilization and our lens distortion correction on at the same time is it really kind of ruins the shot in that we get that weird warping distortion effect. If we weren't moving, it'd probably be fine if it was just stationary. But when we're actually moving and stuff, I've noticed repeatedly that we get a lot of this weird distortion, this weird warping going on, which basically makes the shot unusable for something that we're wanting to really look nice and cinematic like. So with that said, let's just go ahead and look at them all one after another. So with this next set, we're looking at just lens distortion. So we didn't do anything with the image stabilization. On the right hand side, we have adjust distortion on. On the left side, we have adjust distortion off. So we'll see again a little bit of that warping, but not nearly as much as if we had stabilization on also. So you see we've got just a little bit there, but as we get moving and we're panning upwards, it really came out pretty smooth. You don't see too much more distortion with it. And then again here with this next clip, we've got this tree here, we've got some leaves on the ground here, we've got some little trees growing up and such. We're just going to pan up again. On the bottom, starting on the bottom, we have our lens distortion correction on the top it's off. You can see again, if you watch towards the left side here, we'll get some warping again. We actually get quite a bit of warping, kind of stutters around. then as we pan up, you can see that that tree actually looks a lot more correct than it does with it off. So it does do a good job at correcting the image. The problem is that extra warping that it induces just really kind of makes it unusable. So probably one of the things that I would suggest is figure out a good correction strategy for that. And so one of the things you might do is you might come in here. It's probably best if you shoot maybe some graph paper or something. You shoot something that can give you a good reference and figure out about what that distortion tends to be, and you can just apply that to all your clips, or you can kind of eyeball it like with this one. I mean, I'm pretty familiar with this beach. It's a place I've gone a lot, and we've got this nice horizon here. You know, we can kind of just play with this until we get it to where it feels like it's about right. And so here's where we started from. If we just start dragging this out a bit, whoop, that was a bit too far. Bring it back in, you know, we can get a nice, good, you know, somewhere right around in here. You see that horizon's a lot flatter now. Maybe about there. 'Cause, I mean, the horizon's still going to have a little bit of a curve because it is the ocean. You know, you see how far enough it does kind of curve, but you can see it's not nearly as bowed as it was before, and we get a much nicer shot. So for our next two sets of clips, we're going to look at frame rate. Now the first set was shot at 2.7K. The second shot it's kind of a mix. So these first couple shots, these clips were shot at 24 frames a second, 30 frames a second, and 60 frames a second. So we're going to go ahead and look at these and compare them. And then the next set was shot at, most of them were shot at 1080p. So we shot 60 and 120 frames a second at 1080p. And then the E4K Action Cam allows us to do 240 frames a second, but only at 720p. So we don't get full HD out of it, but we do get a higher frame rate. So we'll look at that also. So let's dive in and look at those clips. So you see here we start with our 24 frames a second. Then we bring in our 30 frames a second. And then again we bring in our 60 frames a second in the bottom right corner here. Alright, and then for the second set we've got the 60, the 120, and the 240. Now obviously for the 240 we had to scale it up some since it was shot at 720p for it to fit our full frame, but that's fine. Let's go ahead and look at how that looks. What's amazing to me is watching back this footage is seeing the 60 frames a second compared to the 120 frames. Because the 120 frames just look so much smoother. Now this is all probably slowing down some too since it's being scaled to 60 frames a second. But just how much more smooth the water looks and how much more easily it seems to flow. You get so many more frames in there. It looks great in my opinion. Now one of the interesting things too is it seems like as we shift into the 120 frames a second, the shot actually looks clearer. If we look at the rock here, you can see in this middle slice where we've got our 120 frames a second, the details in the rock are a lot more obvious than they are in our 60 frame a second shot. I'm not entirely sure why that is, but it is. So one of the things I haven't really shown yet is the 4K capabilities of the E4K Action Cam. So let's go ahead and take a look at a shot or two that I did in 4K so you can see how much detail it's actually able to pull out. Something to note about all of this footage, all of this I shot flat. So you've got two options with the E4K. You can either shoot it with the E color or you can shoot it flat. Now I've shot all this flat. I've done some preliminary color grading here. I might tweak this a little bit more before you actually see it. But shooting it flat is nice and I wanted to try it so I could try getting my own color out of it. And it is kind of nice because it allows me to pull out what colors I want instead of just running with what they've got built in. Now you can use the Yi color that's built in if you don't want to spend the time color grading. You just want to get something you can use easy. So when I got this, one of the main selling points for me was the fact that it could shoot 4K. It can shoot 4K at 24 frames a second and at 30 frames a second. And then in 2.7K, you know, we can shoot all the way up to 60 frames a second. If we go all the way down to 1080, then, you know, we've got all the way up to 120 frames a second. And at the time, for the price point, and even probably still now, for what it's able to do, it's really a decent bargain for the price. I think I spent about $200 on this, whereas a comparable GoPro was something like $400. And so it was kind of a no-brainer to me. Is the image stabilization maybe as good, especially as the new GoPros? No, but depending on how you're using this and such, if you're on a budget, it works fantastic. Now, I shot a lot of video with this thing when I was in Malibu. I shot probably a good 30-40 minutes, I think, with this. I had it running. And, you know, it hardly used any battery life sitting there recording, just waves coming in and stuff. It maybe used 15-20% battery, I don't remember entirely off the top of my head, but it was negligible. It hardly used anything. And so, you know, you're going to get good battery life out of this thing. You can shoot 4K if you want to. I mean, it's a 12 megapixel photo if you want to shoot photos also. It's got a case mode, so it can work inside the waterproof case easy. Everything just relies on button clicks. You can connect it to your phone, so you can control it with your phone. A lot of those shots I did where the frame rate changed, I'd set it down so that our shot would be the same. And then what I did is I just changed the frame rate every couple clips with my phone and just started it, stopped it. Now it does have a bunch more settings that I haven't gotten into in this video. It does have like a slow motion capture mode. We've got a time lapse, we've got a timer, we've got photo, we've got burst photos. So there's really a lot more it can do. If you'd like to see me do a video where I go into more of those features and test them out and compare and such, if there's some other comparisons you'd like to see me do, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. Let me know what you'd like to see. Go ahead and leave a thumbs up if you like this video, if you found it helpful. I've got a link in the description below to this camera on Amazon. Go ahead and check that out if you're thinking about getting this. It is definitely something I'd recommend. I regret losing my second one. I'll probably pick up another one sometime in the near future. But that'll do it for this video, guys. Consider subscribing if you found this interesting and informative, and I will see you guys next time.